Welcome everyone to the Eugene City Council work session for September 27th. Welcome to everyone here and everyone at home. I'm first thing up is committee reports and items of interest, and I'm going to start out with something a little unusual. We have a dedicated time in our regular council meetings for proclamations, but this is sort of out of sequence because we don't do it on this particular meeting, and this is an important week for the Cultural Trust, so I promised that I would share with you that we've proclaimed the week of Friday, October 1st, 2010 to Friday, October 8th, 2010 as Oregon Days of Cultural Week in Eugene, and call upon all of our citizens to participate in Oregon's culture, to celebrate its vibrancy and depth, and to give to the arts, heritage, and humanities to ensure their future vitality. I think we have some. Do we have anybody here for the Cultural Trust? We're going to try to make it. Okay. So I think the point that I would like to make, most of you are familiar with the Cultural Trust as a way to support the arts. And just as a reminder of one of the reasons that we want to remember and have this proclamation is the Oregon Cultural Trust since 2003 has invested over $502,000 in the city of Eugene. So they have and continue to contribute greatly to our arts and culture scene here in Eugene, and therefore to our economy, and a lot of great times for all of us. So I hope we'll all celebrate Oregon Days of Culture Week. And I move on to, last week I went to a Rail Now conference where people in Salem had a conference pushing for action on high-speed rail. I went to the Bethel Talent Show, which was really a lot of fun. It was great. We had, as you all know, a really, I think, good memorial for former Mayor Ruth Bascom, and especially appreciate Chris's emceeing of that event. I thought it went really, really well. We had mayors and city managers and city councilors from all over the state here with us for the League of Oregon Cities Conference, and our staff did a great job. And I just want to, as did the Hilton, and I just want to express my appreciation to all. I didn't hear anybody say anything but how much fun it was to be in Eugene, so that was a really good thing. Lila Lane Independent Living Alliance opened their peer support center downtown, and so a place for people to go and make friends and do things together. That's great. Brian Obie had a great unveiling of Inn at 5th, that the hotel that he's going to be building at 5th Street Market, so that was a great event. There was a Nobel laureate groundbreaking ceremony at Alton Baker Park, where that's going to be a thing that they're going to put there to recognize first one in the country to recognize Nobel laureates. And the final thing I want to say, I'm just going to take a little bit of extra time because I think this is important to all of us. Over the weekend, we had a event where a lot of people were in the middle of the night in our town, and had called for a police response, and I've had a lot of mail about it. I'm sure that you have. I just wanted to make a comment. I hope that you will feel as on part of all of us. The U of O plays an important role in our state and city and in our local economy. We welcome the 20,000 students to our city and ask that they be good community members, good neighbors, and abide by our laws. It is important to remember that a fair number of the participants weren't students, and that the students who did participate are but a tiny fraction of the larger law-abiding student body. Having said all of the above, I take the Friday events quite seriously. We've been working on a lot of strategies with the University of Oregon, property owners, landlords, students, neighbors, EPD to prevent such events and to help students be successful in their stay in our community. The Friday events will have consequences legally for those arrested, and tomorrow the university president and I and many other stakeholders, including some of them around this table, will be out knocking on doors and talking to students. This is a challenge faced by college communities across this country and not unique to Eugene. I know the University of Oregon is working on keeping more of its freshmen and sophomores on campus, and all of us will continue our work together even more intensely. So just wanted to make that statement on the part of all of us that we are committed to being a great place for students to live and get their education and be good neighbors and share this community together. With that, I will move to you, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll pass.
George?
A number of things real quickly. In our packet on the media calendar and other meetings, it showed the Harlow Neighborhood Association general meeting on the 30th. That's actually the executive committee meeting and not the general meeting, so just to get that out. Thursday, I attended the Travel Lane County Board meeting at Our Daily Bread in Veneta, family-owned and operated restaurant that's now moving into weddings and caterings and stuff. While there, we were advised that through Kesey Enterprises, right, Cuthbert sold over about 56,000 tickets this season. They just closed the season out Tuesday. That's double the number from last year, and they just negotiated another 5-year contract to continue putting on events and shows. I think they did an excellent job this year on the shows there. Carrie Westland, our CEO, had her annual evaluation. Again, she really had excellent ratings. And for the second straight year, she's passed up on a raise in her salary. I think we have a gem there with Carrie that we're very lucky to have her heading that organization. April 10th, I think it's 10th, 11th, and 12th of 2011, the City of Eugene is hosting the Governor's Conference on Tourism, so that's going to be an exciting time. Thursday night at 7 o'clock, I'm meeting with Eric Johnson from Public Works and the residents from Sandy Drive in reference to their concerns about the road, the condition of their road. So that's going to be at the Methodist Church there at Oakway and Cal Young. I'm sure you've all received these postcards about the funding for St. Vincent's.
I just wanted to share those with you too, George. These are all the ones we've received.
I'm sorry, but this is the first that I've heard that we're considering cutting funding. Do you know anything about these things?
I haven't seen the cards.
Why don't you pass those down to John? John, if you would look into that and get a response back from us. I was unaware that we were even considering doing that, so maybe that's something that...
Do we fund it?
Yeah, that's what my question is. So if you can just give us a...
Through HSC.
Yeah, okay.
Through HSC.
I sent out a response when Chief Kearns sent out the press release, I sent out a response to everybody. I just want to publicly thank our officers and the officers from the agencies that were called in to support. I think they did a great job. I think their response was appropriate. It's an embarrassment, as far as I'm concerned, to our city to have to put our public safety officers in that situation. So hopefully we can work to avoid such incidents again. And then Saturday night, Andrew and I attended the Food for Lane County Empty Bowls charity auction. It was a good event. There was a number of other elected officials and soon-to-be elected officials that were there also. So it was a pretty busy week.
Jennifer,
I'm sorry. One other thing. The other reason, there are other events that come up that, because of work schedules and other conflicts, that we're not all able to make. And regrettably, I didn't make any of the League of Oregon Cities. I would have liked to, but it just you can't be in two places at once.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer?
Thank you. I just have 3 quick items. I attended an HSC meeting, and that might be where these postcards are emanating from. HSC is in the process of sort of balancing their priorities, for lack of a better word, into 4 different categories. And then they will assign a percentage of their funds to those particular categories. The homeless one, though, I still think is in the top tier, so I'm not really sure what the genesis is there. So if you will follow up on that, I do believe that's out of HSC. I also attended a PSCC meeting, and then on a more personal note, I chaperoned a 3rd grade field trip to Alton Baker Park. And we found ourselves in the Willamette Natural Area, and so we were able to show the kids, well, not me, I was just a chaperone, but the leaders were showing the kids the talking stones, and that was really fun to see that, because we talk about them a lot here.
George?
Thank you. I attended a police commission meeting, and the use of force subcommittee, they're going through the police operation manual, policy by policy, and they the two that they presented basically cosmetic changes to 300 and 308 use of force, other than tasers and service weapons. So that was pretty straightforward. Also, they voted on 5-4. I thought that was kind of interesting. On the recommendation that council extends the downtown exclusion zone, there was pretty extended conversation about the exclusion zone, and there was a fair amount of skepticism exhibited about its usefulness. The police's own statistics kind of showed that maybe it's not really doing what we want it to do. Anyway, it was a 5-4 vote, but they did approve. They would recommend that we keep it. Went to a CRB meeting. The chief and the auditor and the CRB all agreed in contradicting the police internal investigation, who said that it was in policy for, if you'll remember a few months ago, the fellow that was in his house and got attacked by a police dog was released on him instead of the fellow who'd broken into his house and got away. Everybody, the chief, the auditor, and the CRB said it was not in policy. It was a violation of the use of force agreement. So what's going to happen with that, I don't know. And then I went to the United Day of Caring, and Councilor Pryor and the mayor were picking up trash on the trail in Alton Baker Park by Nearby Nature, and I was attacking blackberries with a pair of shears, and we did good work. We made really good headway, and it was kind of fun. A lot of staff from Eugene and from Springfield, too, so it was kind of fun. And then went to a Human Rights Commission meeting. Lastly, there's a really fabulous exhibit at the Schnitzer Art Museum at the U of O. It's a printmaker from Italy in the 1700s, Giuseppe Vazzi. It's fabulous. I highly recommend it. Anyone wants to go to Rome, you're thinking about going to Rome, or you've been to Rome, or you like the idea of Rome, please go see this exhibit. It's just fabulous. The guy was terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Okay, Andrea.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, George and Jennifer, for explaining the cards. I was going to ask that same question. And so I felt like it was a busy couple of weeks.
You got my mic?
I have a bad mic today, huh?
It's the speaker above you.
Okay. Or is it just my voice that's echoing? So I went to we had our RAPA board meeting today, and we've chosen to work with Bob Chadwick and Associates to help us do some consensus building and some team building, which I'm personally happy about. I went to the Bethel Talent Show also, and I just want to talk a little bit about that. They raised $6,000, which was amazing. If you think about how hard it is for folks these days. They sold out the business, the whole auditorium, they sold out all the seats, and all the entertainment was by staff. And so I think that was really cute, because there's a lot of young staff there, and they have no qualms about getting up there and having a good time. I also met with Chief Groves. He was kind enough, there was some concerns in the River Road and Whitaker neighborhood about the helicopter landing at 2nd and Chambers, and a lot of folks didn't really understand what was going on there, so he met with us with some of the staff from Life Flight and gave us a tour. Commissioner Handy was also there. I think their questions got answered, and so I think that it was, it's just learning more about how they work, and then they gave us a push for Fire Med and Fire Med Plus, for the air ambulance. I went to the Food for Lane County dinner. I also went to Brian Obie's open house, and that was a great event also. And I just want to thank Chief Groves for going to the Train Song neighborhood meeting. We had an incident there recently where a house was there was gunfire, and nobody was hurt, and I think that they're still looking to see what the cause of it was, but the neighborhood was very concerned, and he had oral surgery that day, I understand, from Mrs. Kearns, went home, went to bed, got up and said, I have to go to a meeting, and so I really appreciate him taking an extra step and going and visiting with my neighborhood. Good. Thank you.
Alan?
I was in Washington, D.C. last week for some work at for a conference, speaking at a conference, and I took the opportunity to also talk with Congressman DeFazio's staff, Wyden staff, Senator Wyden's staff, and Senator Merkley's staff on some work items, but also so I was mixing work and city. And I talked to them about our MPC greenhouse gas scenario planning that we're doing and obligated to do under Senate Bill 2001, and trying to line up funding for that. The MPC staff believes it would take about $500,000 to do that, and as of right now, we have almost zero, or less than that, maybe. And so I talked to all three of them about that. Mayor suggested to come and talk to the IGR, so I'll be coming and talking to IGR folks about what we did there, and also talked about funding for high-speed rail and the studies that ODOT is doing. And then I was also on the Oregon Planning Institute OPI panel for on the MPC Greenhouse Gas Task Force scenario planning and explaining what was going on to planners in Oregon. And thus, while I was in Washington, D.C., though, I missed Mayor Bascom's memorial, and I just wanted to add my words and thoughts to her family, but also to the memory of Mayor Bascom, who I thought did some really great work as mayor, and will be remembered very fondly in my mind and many people's minds for that work she did, especially around bike paths. And in fact, I just rode on her bike path the other day and was thinking about her. I also wanted to comment on the U of O the students in the West University neighborhood. Not everybody there was a student at the University of Oregon, but a good chunk of them were, and it coincides with the start of school. I just wanted to say how very disappointed I was, and kind of a bit angry that went on. That's the second riot in as many years, and that type of behavior is just unacceptable. And I have a call into President Louis Riviere. I didn't get to call him until the late afternoon. He wasn't available, but I plan on following up on that to find out what we can do and they can do to make sure that that doesn't ever happen again, and have a little bit more stringent ramifications from the U of O's perspective on the students that participate in things like that. I also was at the League of Oregon Cities conference, which we hosted here in Eugene on Friday and Saturday, and City Hall week at Springfield the week before that, and then the week before that we also had the Sustainability Commission. We talked about, we got a briefing on Envision Eugene and talked about that quite a bit, transplant and car sharing, which the council asked them to investigate, and they'll be bringing back to us pretty soon. It's on the agenda. And then also we did the Airport Master Plan public hearing with the Board of County Commissioners the other week.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, just a couple of things really fast. A lot of it's already been covered. The Bascom Memorial was really good. It's nice to be able to remember somebody who did so much. And while she may not have attacked the fountain downtown with a jackhammer, she definitely went after it with a bulldozer, and I remember that. And that was pretty good. Also, City Hall Week, the mayor as well as Alan and some other folks attended City Hall Week, which was an important recognition. Also, I wanted to mention that, what was it? I saw it on your list and then I forgot what it was. Yeah. I did. There was another one I do want to mention. I was downtown at the riots, which made me think of it. At the corner of Kincaid and 13th, where little Dinkytown is and where you turn that corner to go north, it's, with students coming back, it's unbelievable there. I'm worried there's going to be some sort of a collision or an accident. There's no crosswalk, no signal, nothing. And so I was just curious to know what it is that we could do in that particular area that could...
13th and what?
13th and Kincaid.
We'll take a look at that.
Right where the
Circle
university
back.
is and the bookstores across the street, and
Right.
it's like this pandemonium, and I'm just worried somebody's going to get run over in that area. And then I was also going to follow up on Days of Caring, because what was really cool about it was a joint group from both Eugene and Springfield working in Alton Baker Park, which is a park that does go into both communities, and both Mayor Piercy and Mayor Lycan were there, as was George, myself, and Councilor Ralston from Springfield was there, plus senior execs from both staffs, and it was really great. I was following along behind Chief Groves picking up trash along the pathways, and it was really a great day and a great event, and I was really pleased to see the joint effort. I think it was very, very good to see not only the public officials but the senior staffs from both Springfield and Eugene working together, and hopefully this is something we can trade cities every year and kind of do it back and forth as a goodwill gesture. So I appreciated that a lot. That's all I had.
Betty?
Thank you. Maybe we can clean up City Hall.
Depends what you have in mind.
Bring a lighter.
I have been some of the same places you talked about, like City Hall Day, but I've spent more time than a lot of time at the League of Oregon Cities Conference, and I was. I know that the mayor helped plan this meeting, and some of us participated, but I was struck by the fact that we don't have any officers from Eugene at this time. There have been in the past people on the board and presidents and so forth, and I think it would be good if we were participating more than we are in running the organization. I went to the Urban Renewal meeting, one of them I went to, and heard later that Alan was there on the other side of the room, and he may have seen it differently from what I did, but one thing I learned there, that we're the only urban renewal district, or the only one from the people who were in the room that has been in effect forever. And someone advised that the thing to do, if you have something to do, do it and then get out. One place, let's see, Medford is closing their district. Hillsborough terminated earlier than they said they would. And there seemed to be a feeling that it should be as for a specific purpose, which of course is what it's supposed to be, to clean up blight. And we must have a lot of blight. I went to a session on partnerships, which was very interesting. And one of the things they talked about was partnering with the National Guard to do certain. I suggested this at council a few years ago. A previous manager was here at the time, but National Guard is willing to help out sometimes just for the experience with some projects in a city without it costing any money. And National Guard and Youth Corps both have been used in some communities. And another partnership in Pendleton, partnership with nonprofits. They have free entertainment on every block on Main Street with the vendors, I guess, pay something, but anyway, there's free entertainment, which I think is a great thing. I've always thought that our Eugene celebration should be free. A lot of but this is all the time, I think. I went to a healthcare session, and people seemed really unclear. There was the facilitator was from CIS, but they seemed unclear about the effect of the new health bills on cities. But it seems that a big problem is the early retirees, people between 55 and 65 who are no longer working and aren't eligible for Medicare yet. And I don't know I don't know if there's anything that council needs to know about that, but I'd be interested in knowing how those things are affecting the city. Okay. And I think I'm out of time. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. One, I want to just point out our new vision, goals, and outcomes board. So thank you to Jan and her team for putting that together. And then also, she'd like to take some photographs during this meeting, the 7:30 meeting, that we can put on the website and perhaps some future meetings. So just if she's out taking photographs, that's what it's for. So we'll all look our best tonight.
Photographs of what?
Of us?
You. All of you.
I didn't get the memo. I'm on vacation now.
Yeah. We'll note that on the website. Yeah. A couple other quick things. I just want to say thank you to the on-the-ground leadership from the incident the other night. For many of you know that those kinds of things can evolve, and so what it really takes is good, strong, appropriate leadership. And so Sergeant Soulsby, Barath, Kamkar, and Gilbert, I think, did a really nice job of controlling the situation, and I just want to send along my thanks to them. And then I spent a part of last week at the Climate Leadership Academy, which I'll give more information on it in the future, but actually it was a really good session. There were 14 cities represented. It was foundation-sponsored, which meant that they paid for us to be there. And from the city, it was myself, Babe O'Sullivan, and Matt McRae. We also had somebody, Felicity from eWeb, and then Stacy from university was also a part of that. And really just it was an emphasis on resilience and adaptation as opposed to mitigation. And I think there was some good information that we'll want to spend more time thinking about. The good news is we really are far out in front from most communities in our thinking about these kinds of things. And the plan that you adopted last week, 2 weeks ago, on our Climate and Energy Action Plan actually includes adaptation kinds of things, which is pretty far out in front of where a lot of other communities are. But it was good conference, had some good information coming back from there, some of which we'll want to kind of think more about as we move down the Envision Eugene process. So.
You, Mike?
I want to say one more thing.
I just wanted to say, George Brown jogged my memory about something that I wanted to mention more on the Police Commission meeting that we both went to 2.5 weeks ago. And I wanted to make comments about 2 weeks ago and didn't make as thorough as I would have liked. But he reminded me that when we did the review of the public safety zone downtown, he's absolutely right that the commission recommended to council 5-4 that we extend that, and I had a different take, however, on the discussion than I think George did. Mine was that we had a good deal of information from the department and from the chief about its effectiveness. Specifically, we had Sergeant Fitzpatrick that runs the downtown patrol there talking about some specific instances in which and how that ordinance was put into place in some circumstances where there were minor children who were in danger from being exploited by some folks downtown and some drug dealers downtown that were then excluded from the area and keeping some young people safe. So just the very few instances that he talked about, I thought I was very thankful that they had that tool to put into place. And I thought it was interesting to note that of the 4 people who voted not to recommend that to us in the minority, at least 2 of those votes had a very specific kind of very narrow concern. It wasn't about its effectiveness so much as it was about a very narrow portion of the language, which I think in discussions with the chief may get addressed in what comes back to us. So I just wanted to give my perspective on that meeting as well.
Betty?
I wanted to add one thing for League of Oregon Cities. I was surprised to hear that Veneta got an award for buying water from a public utility.
I was surprised, too.
Me too.
That's all. Thank you.
I might be able to clarify that. What they have gotten was a grant from the Department of Agriculture to fund that project, plus I think it's some other 2 pots of money through the Department of Agriculture to fund that project, and it has to be used within 5 years. So they pretty much have their money lined up. It's just a matter of the city and EWEB making a final decision on who makes the decision. So I think that's what they may have been talking about.
It was just a bit odd. It felt like it was a little an award before we actually know what was going to happen. But
Yeah, it was 2.6 million of 16 million.
Yeah.
The rest is a loan, which will make their water rates triple, or at least double.
So just to wrap this part up, I just wanted to say, George, I hope you'll keep us up on the Sandy Drive discussion, because I think we're all interested in how that will go. And Jennifer, when we were doing our cleanup, we actually were out by those talking stones. Maybe we cleaned it up before you got there.
They cut the blight. You could see them after they got there.
That's why I could hear them better.
We did that for you. Thank you. You're welcome.
Clear brush around me.
Yes.
I just wanted to also say thank you to Public Works. They repaved Bethel, and as always, I get the credit, so.
Nice job, Andrew.
Right. There you have it. He
Perfectly
even
so.
sweat. So, but it's definitely appreciated.
And just one short comment. In fact, the National Guard here has joined with Northwest Youth Corps before to work on some projects of cleaning out areas and things. So that actually has occurred in the past. Okay, so now we'll move on, and our first item on the our agenda today is the Animal Services Work Session. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to turn this over to Kelly and Sarah and Larry.
I'm going to pass these around.
And this is just this is an update. You might remember during the budget session, there was quite a bit of discussion around animal services and the budget that goes along with that. And Larry has been doing quite a bit of work since then, and there will be more to occur over the next many months, particularly as we move into this next budget session. So,
I'm just going to add a little bit to that. Sarah Maderi, Assistant City Manager. I think the timing of having the new boards up on the wall is good, because now we have not only your vision and goal statements, but the outcomes you were hoping to see. And I was looking up there as I was thinking about this, and a couple of them that rose to me is you asked us to put together a long-term sustainable budget, and you're also asking us to have public engagement that involves the community broadly and stronger partnerships between government entities. And so this really is one of those items that's going to meet multiple outcomes. And just to add to what John said, I think it's important to remember over the last 2 years, especially if people are tuning in right now for the first time, that the reductions that we proposed to the Animal Services contract initially of $200,000 was in context of an $18 million reduction we made over 2 years. And so as you remember, the Budget Committee and you asked us to add back $100,000 and do a comprehensive study. And so I'm going to introduce Larry Hill. He's our senior financial analyst. He does excellent work for the city, and he's, as you're going to see, he's done a tremendous amount of work, and I think is the right person to guide us as we move along this process.
Thanks, Sarah. Larry Hill, I'm senior financial analyst with Budget Analysis. And this is really quite an interesting project. I've been engaged in doing some broad research that's reflected in the AIS and the attachments. So I'd like to summarize some of the points of that, and then we can have a discussion and see how you folks see the direction we're going. First of all, we're addressing the purpose of updating you on activity, so we're not requesting any direction at this point. We have contracts with Lane County Animal Services. Been in effect for a long time. That contract's been renewed. We also are continuing to operate the low-cost spay-neuter center, as we have for many years. The council did reduce the appropriation for the contract with Lane County Animal Services. We've implemented that reduction. We also are responding to two other directions that council gave during the budget process, and that is the municipal court judge is reviewing fees to see if they're in line with other communities and see if there's an opportunity to increase fees, as directed by council. And also the city is city staff is preparing to engage with stakeholders in an ongoing discussion over the next several months in pursuit of a comprehensive review of animal services in the city of Eugene. We have established the contract with a base fee of $585,000 for fiscal year FY11, and also Lane County will continue to retain 95% of licensed revenue for licenses sold to residents of Eugene, as they have in the past. There's no cap on that amount, so 95% of licenses sold they'll retain. The other 5% will go to benefit our spay-neuter service through low-cost assistance to low-income people. The contract does provide for 2 full-time enforcement officers and 1 floating officer. The previous contract had 3 full-time officers. And what we have is a reduction in enforcement as a result of the reduction of $100,000 in the contract. The city did not request the reduction in enforcement, rather through discussions with LCAS. LCAS decided that was the best way to implement the loss of revenue reflected in the budget appropriation of the contract. So we have prioritization of services, and we have the full range of services continuing under the contract. We have enforcement, animal shelters and adoption, licensing, animal regulation, cattery, spay-neuter voucher services, all provided under the contract. With the staffing reduction, however, we will expect to see a reduction in responses by LCAS to some issues, particularly barking dog issues, because that's lowest in the priority list. However, other issues that have a greater priority, especially responding to law enforcement needs, emergency needs, have the highest priority. Currently, we're wrapping up Phase 1 of the comprehensive review, and that's what I've been engaged in for a couple months now. You have 2 attachments to the AIS. One is a fairly detailed summary of experience in Eugene, developments in Eugene of animal services. It's a pretty interesting history if you take the time to look it over. We've had animal services as an issue before the City Council since the 1870s. And back in the early part of the last century, 1920s, we had a full-time dog catcher, and we had a rudimentary pound, and we had licensing requirements. So these are things the city has carried on for a long time. The city provided all of those services itself up until 1949. In 1949, the legislature passed a statute that required counties to provide impoundment capabilities or services, and that's when the county contracted with a brand-new Humane Society, and the transfer of those services was made about 1949 to the Humane Society. And that's detailed. I won't go into further discussion of those details. Also, you have a second attachment, which is a spreadsheet that summarizes the types of the different models and methods that various cities, over 15,000 population in Oregon, use to meet the animal services goals for those cities. And it's quite a range, quite a bit of variety. We can't draw conclusions from this preliminary survey, but we can note that the City of Eugene pays more in appropriations, net appropriations for animal services than any other city in the state.
By more than twice.
So now, we can't, like I said, can't draw conclusions yet, but it does bear further investigation concerning the service and funding levels. And that's one of the things we'll be looking at over the next several months. We expect to wrap up the preliminary research in October and move into discussions and in-depth research on focused issues in the remaining months. We will complete the project by the end of the fiscal year. We hope that we will have useful information prior to that to inform the budget process. But it depends on how the discussions go and whether we can find useful information that can inform that budget process. It's early in the process, and we don't know exactly what we'll come up with. We do intend to engage Lane County Animal Services, City of Springfield, and Green Hill Humane Society in the discussions, and they've agreed to participate in informal, ongoing discussions. We also intend to engage other interested parties. There's over 50 animal welfare organizations, many of them 501c3s, providing services in the Eugene-Springfield area. So there's a lot of different folks involved in animal welfare issues, a lot of concern among the folks in the community. So in addition to engaging the key stakeholders and also engaging representatives of at least some of those animal welfare organizations who are particularly interested, we will give opportunities to the public to give input, and so we can test the public opinion and public desire for services. We're going to be evaluating alternative models for funding and delivering services. We'll be comparing our services to other communities at some detailed level, far more detailed level than the current summary, which is a rather high level. We'll also be involving veterinary service providers, asking for their input, and we'll be bringing that information back to council when we can, certainly before the end of the fiscal year, by the end of the fiscal year, and earlier if we can, like I said, to inform the budget process. At this point, I'd just like to turn it over to you. And
Thank you for that. that, Larry. I guess the only thing, we had a lot of conversation about this during the budget process, but for the folks who are listening today, I just want to emphasize that because we're trying to look at how to pay for animal services, it's not a reflection on the bad provision of services by our current services. In fact, we heard from many, many people how good the provision of services is, and a lot of people who volunteered there talked about their good experience there. It's just a matter of our budgetary issues and trying to do it as efficiently as we can and seeing if there's other options for us. But I really wanted to speak to that we feel like we heard a lot about good provision of services. And the only other question I had is the barking dog issue, and if we are not going to be able to respond at that level, what are we going to do to offer people when they are faced? I think even in the best of times, I heard people say that your dog has to, I don't know, bark for 15 minutes or something to in order to break the rules anyway, which is a lot of barking, and you have to be able to record them doing it. So I just wonder if there are some other options as we go through this of how we might deal with that issue. Betty?
Okay, I had some questions, but I have something to say about barking dogs. It is not true that you have to record it. You can get a ticket. A dog is guilty until proved innocent under current practice, which is just the opposite of what most law is. If someone can say a dog barked for 15 minutes and the owner of the dog gets a ticket and then has to try to prove that it didn't happen. So I think that there's something wrong with that maybe we should discuss at some point. I don't know who decided that. So my questions, though, were what fees were you talking about when you said discuss fees with the judge?
Well, they'd be the fines, the municipal court levies.
Fines?
Yes.
You're thinking about raising the fines?
The municipal court judge is reviewing the fines.
Oh, I see.
And it may be that it's appropriate and reasonable to raise those fines, but we don't have that information yet. That's the intent, to see if that makes sense.
Fines for what? For being loose or barking or what?
There's quite a range of fines. I think there's several dozen different fines: dog at large, vicious dog, all sorts of dogs that aren't licensed. It's quite a range. So.
Is there any consideration of raising the license fees?
We'll be reviewing the license fees as well. One of the considerations is between the jurisdictions in Central Lane County, does it make sense to have license fees be the same, be consistent? So that's one thing we'll be looking at. And we'll also be comparing license fees and other revenue sources, impoundment fees, for instance, with other cities, other communities of our approximate size.
And what, I won't say that right now. Who are the stakeholders you're talking about?
Well, the key stakeholders would be cities of Eugene and Lane County.
Not people,
LCAS.
not dog owners.
The key stakeholders would be the organizational stakeholders providing the services, the two governments, and City of Springfield, because we are a joint urban area, and the animals cross the border all the time. They don't respect boundaries. So that's an issue. And we also have the more than 50 animal welfare advocacy organizations. They range from rescue services to training services, to services that support low-income people with their pets, a wide range of animal advocacy. We even have a rescue service for arachnids and other invertebrates. So we have a big range of interests.
Okay.
People, the arachnid people
that
take that very
spiders?
seriously now. They're spiders. We have a lot of people interested in some aspect of animal welfare. I mean, it's just broad, and I suspect it goes fairly deep in the community. Back in the 70s, there were intense debates about animal services, and that's when we first formed the tri-agency approach to try to address it comprehensively in the urban area, and that eventually fell apart in about 1981. But it became clear that people are pretty passionate about animal services, and it's highly politicized, or it can become highly politicized. So our goal is to engage people who have an interest, and down to the level of dog owners and cat owners, and ferret owners and arachnid owners. So we can get their input and understand. Now, you can see how that can be difficult. We'll probably use an array of tools, surveys. We'll probably have an online form and solicit input on an online forum. We'll probably do mail-out surveys to identifiable groups like veterinary services and the identifiable animal welfare groups. We intend to have a range of ways to get input because we want to know where people are and what they expect. And then on the other side, we have what can we provide with our services in our community. Animal services as a community system. Not just the city, not just the county, but a community system. All those people out there are working. We depend on volunteers at the LCAS shelter. You know, it's a community-wide program.
Any discussion of cat licensing?
I have not found a successful cat license program in the state of Oregon. There is a voluntary cat license program one city has, and there's voluntary registration, but I haven't found a successful cat license program.
I think Sarah wanted to say something.
You know, I just, there's a lot of talk here about stakeholders and who's going to be involved, and I don't think that's been totally nailed down. But I did want to just point out that some of our main stakeholders are actually here in the room. So as you're talking about things, it's not just us that's listening. And we have Karen Gaffney and Tom Howard from the county and LCAS sitting over here. I think also Carrie Lieberman is here, Executive Director of Green Hill. And our own supervising veterinarian from the Spay Neuter Clinic, Marilyn Waters, is also here. So I just wanted to let you know that, so when you're framing your comments, I would know that.
Thank you.
So we should be careful what we say?
No, I just, that we're hearing, that everybody's hearing what your concerns are, so we can address
Well, I
them as
assume
part of
everyone
that
will-
group.
And they don't bite.
I don't know. Then another question, has there been any consideration of free spay and neuter service?
I've been primarily performing research, rather broad research, in the history of animal services and also what other cities are providing. And I haven't encountered another city in Oregon that provides totally free spay-neuter, that has the funding for that. Most cities provide far less funding for animal services in the city of Eugene. Most cities provide no funding for animal services. Unfortunately, they rely on counties in total to fund their animal services. In fact, there are some areas of the state where there are none. There simply are no animal services provided by any government in eastern Oregon. So it varies widely, but I have not found a free spay-neuter service by a government. There are free spay-neuter services that are limited, provided by some nonprofits, but they're very limited.
Seems that it would be cost-effective in a sense. If people could, if the people who can't afford to spay and neuter could have it done free, it would reduce problems of unwanted animals. As for benefits, I think that's, it isn't all service. It reminds me of the benefiting properties on streets when they're repaired. Sometimes it's persecution rather than helping, in my opinion. But and my little puppy hasn't done any bad thing yet. In case you- Yeah.
Operative word.
That's enough, thanks.
Okay, I've got Andrea, Alan, George Brown, Mike, George Paul, and Jennifer. Andrea.
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of have a question. I'm not sure how to frame it, so I'll make another statement instead while I'm thinking about it. Just tell me that there's not an advocacy group for nutria, please.
No, there is one for ferrets.
Okay, ferrets.
Not nutria.
How about a bounty?
Not for nutrient.
We can start one.
Your evaluation is that.
How about a bounty instead?
Yeah, bounty.
So I understand that we pay a certain amount to be a part of this, to have these services provided for us. Now, I wouldn't think that it would be cost-effective to try and to have the same services within the city footprint of services of what we do here. But is there any way that we have we looked at, or what is the thought around us having our own staff that work with them, like they're city staffers and they have, and would there be any cost savings to that?
That is one of the important questions that the research and the discussion and the analysis will try to answer. There's a number of different models. Some cities provide their animal services totally in-house, whether it's a lot or a little. Some cities contract them out totally. We're a hybrid. We provide some services in-house, spay-neuter, and we contract out most of our services to LCAS and have for some time. There's some communities that contract with their county and with the local humane society. Redmond and Bend, for instance, use humane society services for shelter and adoption and public education, and they use the county for licensing. And then they provide enforcement both with county personnel and using their law enforcement personnel. In Eugene, we don't do that. Our law enforcement personnel don't enforce animal code. It's all the county. So there's a wide range. There's also a wide range of ways to issue licenses to generate revenue. 10 communities in Lane County have their own license program. Veneta, for instance, Cresswell. It doesn't mean that it's the best choice for the city of Eugene, but that's one thing we need to look at. And many other cities, the licensing is done by the county for the city. So there's such a wide range of models. What fits Eugene? What fits Eugene is the question we're going to try to answer. And it has to be answered in the context of those community services, our constituencies, our animal service constituencies, the ones that really are interested and focused, as well as the average citizen who isn't so interested. They might have a dog or cat, but they're not passionate about animal services. So that's what the next several months are intended to address, Phase 2.
Well, I just, speaking of the budget process that we went through last year, I was personally somewhat disappointed that we chose to continue to fund the services the level that we did when we had originally given direction, or had originally hoped to get a second van for Cahoots. Because I think that, I enjoy animals, but I love people. And I think that, when there's that balance, I think Cahoots could definitely help public safety downtown and that whole program that we had hoped to roll out. So, and that's fine that we went that way. I mean, Cahoots is flexible. The people at Whitebird are always willing to help and step up whenever they can. But that's my challenge. That's, I think, our challenge as counselors. It's, animals are people. Who are we going to help? So, thank you. Thank you for your work, Larry.
Alan?
So I think it's an important service for public safety and public health reasons, and I support it, but I'm concerned about the cost and how we pay for it, and hopefully this upcoming more in-depth study will help me with that. When I look at the survey materials, I see that only 11 out of the 37 in the survey, cities in the survey, actually have a city line item cost for animal services. And I suspect that's because most places it's provided by the county exclusively.
That's right. Most cities, the ones in the survey that are in your packet, are cities over 15,000 population, and most of them rely on the county exclusively for animal services and don't provide any funding. They may have, let me add, they may have incidental funding because in many cases the police have the assignment of responding to code violations, but they differ in terms of how high a priority that is and how much time they spend on that. So if there's a vicious dog in the city, it may be the police that respond, not the county. But those costs are often minor, and they're buried in the police personnel budget, and they can't be broken out.
Yeah, right. Saw that in the write-up. And when I look at the cost per capita, Eugene's at the top of the list at $3.28 per capita per person. Springfield 208, but then it drops off. Hermiston 171, Corvallis 167, Redmond 141. We're more than twice most cities, and I'm trying, and that with the provision of services at the county level, and I think there's all these different kinds of services and levels of services, which is probably accounting for all these kind of differences. And I'm wondering if when we do this next level of study in Phase 2, we're going to get into that what are you getting for the buck kind of question.
Exactly. We will attempt to answer that. We'll be looking at the cost and the benefit and the outcomes
Because we might be preserving a lot more services in animal services than other people that pay a modest amount.
Yes.
Okay.
George Brown?
Thank you. Well, my questions aren't so much with the material you presented here, which is really great. Thank you very much. Look forward to the next round of it. These are more, I just didn't understand what some of these terms were, so I see people from LCAS here, so I'm just going to ask my questions, and whoever can answer them, please try to. On page 15, on number 3, it says, feral fix, no-cost spray, neuter, option for feral cats. I'm just wondering what that is. Do people call in? Say, like, you've got these wild cats that are hanging out in your garage. They're not really your cats, they're wild. And so they call in and someone comes and neuters them? Or
It's not quite that simple, but actually, Feral Fix is the name of the project. Some of you, I know, were here a couple years ago when the city council talked about what to do about feral cats, and so we entered a joint venture with the county, Green Hill, and the city of Eugene to help do very, very low-cost spays and neuters for feral cats. So it's a system that relies on volunteers. There's a group of volunteers that can help trap that's organized through Green Hill. We have volunteer vets. Oh, the other partners are the Lane County Veterinary Medical Association. So volunteer vets who at no cost come and work in the surgical suite at Green Hill. So that's the system that we use for unowned cats.
and then they release them?
Yes, then they're returned,
They can't be adopted
basically.
because they're...
Exactly, but that way they won't reproduce, and it's based on the research that says at least they'll hold their territory, and it really keeps the numbers down.
Okay. And then my second question is, on that same page, it says there's a 12 hours a week, a local dog behavior and training specialist comes in to assess and treat behaviorally challenged dogs at the shelter. What exactly does that mean? Just give me an example. I mean, I'm sure there's probably lots of different things.
Most of the dogs that come into our shelter, we don't know anything about their history. So they're stray for the most part. And some of those dogs exhibit behavior problems we might be concerned about. So this professional is someone who can assess and evaluate through a series of standard dog evaluation tools and basically give an idea of whether a dog is treatable or not. So with rehabilitation, could that dog be okay to adopt out, and what that plan for rehabilitation would be, or if it really isn't treatable, to let us know that up front too.
Okay. All right, and then on that same page, it talks about transfer of Lane County Animal Services animals to other shelters. When does that occur? When LCAS fills up?
Well,
Do you transfer them, or?
it's an ongoing process, actually. The idea is we have a network of other shelters, many of them humane societies, although some of them could be other municipal shelters as well, who have space for animals, and so they can track on our website what animals we have. We also have staff on our end that will contact other shelters to say, these are the dogs we're trying to place, and find other opportunities where they might be able to be adopted out better in Bend, for instance, than they are here or in Southern Oregon, and then make that transfer.
Okay, thanks. Finally, the next page, I assume it's some kind of dog toy, a Kong. I don't know what a Kong is.
Yes.
Never heard that term
A
before.
Kong is a very sturdy plastic toy, rubber toy that is hollow in the middle, and so you can put treats or other things inside it that will keep a dog entertained for quite some time, trying to get the treat out.
Running out of smart dog.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Especially.
Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Very good job with all of this. It's a lot of hard work. Good job. My first comment or question is around what you had mentioned as the municipal court judge studying the increase in penalty fees for dog attacks and for all manner of things, as I would appreciate. Is he also studying other penalty phases or other things that may come into play as effective penalties for dog attacks specifically? And I ask that because I've had at least 2 constituents in the last year call me and tell me about their their neighbors with 2 vicious dogs that they let on the loose who, mauled and killed their cats in their front yard in 2 separate neighborhoods, and how then, those owners were fined, but then the dogs were returned to the environment so that those owners could continue to be irresponsible with them. And so I'm looking, are we studying other manner of penalties other than just increasing fiscal penalties on those folks who would be that irresponsible?
Well, the municipal court judge is looking at just the fines. I think that the policy issues about appropriate penalties for vicious dogs besides the fines, I can imagine a range of penalties that could be imposed, will be something that we could look at as a policy question in the course of the review.
I'd be real interested in that part.
Okay.
In order to be responsive to, just not the 2 owners of those pets, but those happened in neighborhoods with a lot of small kids. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people in Ward 5 in those areas that are really, really concerned that we're not doing a good enough job to protect them from irresponsible owners.
We'll flag that for review, and probably the city legal staff would be able to contribute to our thinking on that, too.
Okay. Secondly, it's my understanding that up until this last budget cycle, there was a revenue split for licensing between the city and the county, or between LCAS with
That's still the case.
It's still the case. I thought we removed the cap.
We did.
The cap is removed, but it's a percentage split.
Okay.
So LCAS keeps 95% of the license revenue for residents of Eugene that license their animals, and 5% is allocated to the low-cost spay-neuter vouchers.
Okay. Well, since we've taken the cap off, I was interested in whatever we could do from a financial perspective to increase the amount of money that that LCAS could bring in by incentivizing their work to try and get a higher percentage of animals licensed. So I don't know if there's creativity, but while you're in the process of the work there, if there are some creative ways to incentivize them to be able to get more out of their good efforts to try and increase the number of animals registered, I'd be in favor of that.
Okay.
And then lastly, I guess, do we have a plan B as a city organization in the unfortunate event that the county, as I expect them to do, loses a big chunk of funding, and that affects LCAS? I mean, if rural schools isn't reauthorized and they have some fairly large-scale cuts, do we have a plan B as a city to compensate for any changes in service?
We know that the county could encounter loss of revenue, and that could impact, or probably would impact, its services. We don't know what services it would impact, but we do know that generally services could be impacted at the county level. So we're anticipating risk there, and we're also keeping, over in budget, a very close eye on the county budget process because of that risk, not only to animal services, but to the jail and other services important to the city. So we anticipate a level of risk with no certainty about it yet. We don't have a plan, so to speak, on how to respond to that, but it certainly increases the importance of having an in-depth, honest discussion with the various key stakeholders, especially Lane County and Green Hill and the City of Springfield, and key citizens, including people involved with animal welfare organizations. It raises the importance of that discussion happening to see what can we provide were the risk to manifest itself.
Let me ask you as a follow-up to that, you mentioned that, is it the state then, I suppose, that has mandated that the county provide a certain level of service?
In 1949, there was a requirement the counties provide impoundment services. But, and there's a series of statutes that state has that can be superseded by county code or city code. But if the county doesn't have animal code of its own, it defers to the state statutes, and that gives them authority to regulate animals. I'll express personal judgment. I don't consider the state statutes to be particularly sophisticated. I think that they're really in need of updating, but they are present. I don't think that counties currently are required, or at least the state is not enforcing a requirement that counties provide these services, because there are counties in the state that do not provide services.
Okay, that's really what I was getting at. I know there are other areas where if the county isn't able to do it through budgetarily. No, all right, thank you.
So we're 10 minutes over, and we've got 2 left, and then we should move on. George Polling and then Jennifer.
Well, most of the points have already been covered. I just want to say that the review of the fines and fees, that was something that I suggested when we were going through the budget process, and there was a list that came out comparing Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County's fines and fees, and it was all over the board. I think it would be a good idea if it was more consistent throughout the metropolitan area on fines and fees. And I'm glad Mike brought up the possible other sanctions, and that's something we should be looking at, because there are an increasing number of unfortunate, vicious incidents involving animals. So I think that's something that we also need to look at. And just a real quick thank you to the people of LCAS for the work they do. They're understaffed and overworked, like most most folks are. And how you manage to keep your head above water, I don't know, but thank you for the work you do. And Larry, you got your work cut out for you. Good luck.
Jennifer?
Larry, thanks for a great job on this. This is really interesting. I just simply wanted to know if you had heard last spring the county had a speaker down from, I believe, Toronto, Canada, to talk about these kind of issues. Were you aware of that? And that discussion might be able to provide some food for thought.
Well, Karen, I'm sure, will share any information. Calgary.
Okay, yes.
Calgary is well known for a successful program. And there are other very interesting programs. King County in Washington is developing a regional program with 27 cities signed on with the county for regional entity. Down in Wasco County, Nevada, there's another example of good interjurisdictional cooperation. So we are gathering that information, too. We don't detail it in these attachments, but we're gathering information on more widely spread examples. And we'll try to learn lessons from those as well. So we're trying to pull the best information and best lessons we can out of what's out there, not only in Oregon, but in other states, other countries, even Canada, and also from our own experience, our own history, the tri-agency experience, I think has some important lessons that we can learn from and become more successful in the future if we attempt to go that way with interjurisdictional cooperation. One last point, if I could add, is the handout, the attachment on the history and developments has a list of the recommendations from the various reports done by task forces and groups under the leadership of Lane County. Lane County has done a good job of reviewing its program and seeking to improve its program consistently, examining its program. So take a look at the summary of the recommendations and also the comments that Karen provided last spring, I've reproduced, about how those recommendations have been responded to by the county and by the city. Under no circumstances are we saying the county is doing a poor job. We are not saying that. We are saying, can we do a better job? Can we do a more efficient job? And especially, can we get the job done when we're under the budgetary pressures that we expect will be?
Thank you for that. Betty, real quick.
Okay.
We are now
I know.
15 minutes late. Okay.
I didn't use all my time last time either. But my question is this, I know it costs more for a license if a dog has not been spayed or neutered, right?
Right.
Except for senior citizens. Is that still true? And if so, why would it be different?
There is a senior.
I would...
I don't know if Larry has the license fees. I know we have a senior discount, and I don't remember.
We do have the senior discount, but I don't... Oh, senior citizen dog regular is $70 for 3 years, $55 for 2 years, $35 for 1 year. And that is the same as dog regular, not spayed. So I think we'll have to do a little more thought about this to try to answer your question.
I just wondered why it would be less for seniors for a non-neutered dog.
we'll flag that when we get into looking at the fees closely and see if we can come to some...
Because I think everyone should probably be encouraged to neuter and spay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I think you've got, I encourage anybody to pass more questions on if it comes to them, right? Yeah.
Good job.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on our work session is the city manager evaluation follow-up. Alana?
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Alana Holmes, Human Resources Director. With me today is Denise Smith, our Performance and Evaluation Manager, who, as you recall, was with us in July when you conducted your city manager evaluation. We're here tonight to follow up on that evaluation process. When you asked us to go back and draft a proposed compensation structure and a new performance rating system for future years for the city manager's process. So, Glenn, did you want to add something?
Just take a moment to explain to you what the changes are in what was at your places today. On attachment B, there are two changes. The first at the top, we didn't have anything in attachment B or in the proposed contract that would have said if there are bad budget times, the council could decide, notwithstanding a very favorable evaluation, that the manager wouldn't get an increase. And so what this does is to give the council, a future council, the ability to say, John, we think you did a really fantastic job, bad budget time, so we're not going to give you an increase. Down at the bottom of that page, we had meant to write fiscal year 2012, 2013. When we put the July 1, 2012, it actually bumped things out a year farther, and so what we've done is to add the July 1, 2011, cross off the last year of July 1, 2016. In attachment C, well, the very last page of this, this would be Exhibit 1 to the proposed contract amendment. It just makes the same changes that I just mentioned to you. Up at the top, gives the council the ability to say, notwithstanding a very favorable evaluation, bad budget times, you don't get an increase. And then down at the bottom, it clarifies two things. One, the fiscal year, and then also just to make sure that I understood it correctly when it said deferred comp would increase, how that deferred comp really would work. And so it gives the numbers that would wind up there.
Other comments?
So basically, in your packet, I thought we could start with attachment A, and if you recall, in the previous performance review, the ratings that were utilized were below expectations, meet expectations, and exceeds expectations. And there certainly was a lot of discussion amongst this group about, how we could maybe utilize other ratings, but also try to put forth a foundation of common understanding for what those ratings meant. So perhaps it wouldn't be such a, so hard sometimes to try to get to, what does this rating really mean? And so with attachment A, what we tried to do was provide new ratings to a degree. It's a three-tier system with numerical values, but also outlined in the bullets what each of those, mean as far as value. And would wonder if you have any questions or comments on those.
I've got Mike, and then Chris, and then George.
Okay. First, I want to say everybody at the table knows this, but for the purposes of anybody watching on TV, the mayor and the council officers often do an agenda review sort of meeting before we come into this meeting. And in that, we discussed this as perhaps an opportunity for us to combine the efforts that we're doing with the evaluation of the auditor and do what we're talking about here, which is to create a less arbitrary system and a more structured system for all of the council employees. And as the manager's has graciously already put forward his desire that based on the economic situation and what other staff members are dealing with, that he not be given an increase this year. This year is already essentially kind of taken care of, and so there's less urgency for us to act and move forward tonight. And so we thought we'd kind of throw it out to the rest of the table to consider the idea of postponing action, but to have more of a discussion on how do we combine the two of them, how do we put this system into place as it's been put forward and refined so that it's less arbitrary and a better opportunity for all of our council employees. And I'd like to say that I appreciate what was handed to us here tonight just as we began, as it addresses what my chief concern, that while I want to make sure that the process is less arbitrary, at the same time I didn't want to tie the hands of a future council into a position where if the economy was still struggling, if other jurisdictions had a different manner of compensation for their managers, or our organization was experiencing a different sort of compensation model, that we couldn't kind of make it similar to the marketplace in that way and have that sort of flexibility. So I'm happy to see that language put in the top portion there. So I guess I would say that our recommendation was that we talk about how to refine this, but maybe not move on anything tonight until we bring those back together for one final act.
I'm going to call on Chris next, but before that, I just wanted to say, is this language that you've put in here, which I too appreciate, does this language lock you into either going for the merit levels that are mentioned or not at all? So does it mean that then there's a consideration about whether you want to have some ability to flex in between or something?
The way the language is written, it would be an all or nothing, but there isn't anything that would preclude the council, say, a year from now, saying, we really can't afford, the budget isn't horrible, but it's not good. We really can't afford to do both. John, if you will agree to take one, we can do a contract amendment at that time. If you won't agree to take one, then you're going to get none. Mm-hmm. You'd still have that flexibility. The more we can build in more flexibility than this provides, but the more flexibility you build into this, the more you get away from trying to have some objective system going back to future council. You would be in the same position you are today. So that's the struggle we were trying to address here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Chris?
Actually, I think you defined it really well, and for that reason, I would be very supportive of what Mike is talking about. I think we're most of the way there, and I really appreciate where the discussion's going to try to take the arbitrariness out of it, because I think part of the problem we've gotten into in the past is we've taken arbitrariness and taken it to a place where it shouldn't go. And we want to try to build some reliability and objectivity into it, but I also agree sometimes there's just realities that intrude. But for me, I want to be able to strike an even more effective balance, and if it takes a little more time to do it, for example, ominous, what does ominous mean? My ominous might not be Jennifer's ominous. And that's where you start to build into it that, you've got this much of a budget shortfall and somebody decides that's ominous because I don't want to pay my city manager more money. And if you take John out of it and you take me out of it and you take these two great people out of the discussion and it's somebody else sitting in these chairs, it might be an entirely different discussion. A second thing, too, that would be part of this ongoing conversation is the notion of the standards that you use. And I know I've looked at a lot of performance evaluations, and on many occasions they will use the word successful as opposed to fair. Because to me, fair is a below average term. If you say, how you doing? I'm doing fair. Everybody knows that fair means I'm not doing as well as I could be. And so I think when you read this, it says meets acceptable standards, meets job performance standards all or most of the time. It basically says you're being successful at what you do. So just as something to throw out there, I would maybe change that to be successful. What that says is that's the set point, that's the baseline. If you get there, you're okay. You're not doing great, but you're doing average, and that's worth a 1. But good, okay. Now we're starting to move into those things where you're beginning to recognize exceptional performance in whatever way that is. So I didn't have a lot of changes. I'm just looking for how we can take how we can add objectivity to flexibility and come up with something really effective. But it's in no way a criticism of the work that's been done. You've really done an exceptional job
Yeah.
here, trying to get to what we want to do.
Thank you.
You've done a good job, or excellent job.
Or just fair.
We're not quite successful yet.
Successful job.
No, it's good.
George?
I just have a question on one of the, well, a couple of these, on the attachment A, under excellent. It says, performance is at a level that is a stretch. To me, that means, it's a stretch to make it to fair. Not, it's a stretch that somebody's doing so well. So I don't like that type of
Okay.
wording, so we can kind of reword that.
We can.
And then in looking over the good category, there's a number of level of good sound performance type things, and then the very last one demonstrates very high level of performance in all areas. To me, would be something that would need to be, I think, would be dropped down into the excellent category. And other than that, I see nothing wrong. I'm pretty happy with the rest of it.
Jennifer?
Let's see. Alana, I had a question on attachment B under the example of the weighted average range. And I don't know if it's a mistake or if I just misunderstand. So under the example, you said there were 2 fair ratings. So they get 2 times 1 is a 2. 3 good ratings. Are you tracking me?
Yes,
And
Denise is too.
3 times 2 is 6. Okay, I get that. Excellent is he got 3, or the city manager got 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So you divide the total by 6 respondents, but I'm thinking it looks to me like there are 8.
Yeah, the math
And
is not right.
technically, wouldn't there be 9 in this particular?
Yeah, and I'll take responsibility on that example.
Well, I didn't know if I just was misunderstanding.
Yeah, no, there's no magic tricks to the numbers. That's a miscalculation on mine, trying to give you an illusion of what that would work, but I didn't calculate those correctly.
Well, because it did
So
make
here
it
it
a
would have been
different,
8.
Right.
when I did it by 8, it became, I think, a 1.3.
2.2.
Right, so it dropped it down at that point in time, and I can redo an example for you that's
Oh, no, that's
more
okay.
dominant. Yeah.
You don't have to do it for me either.
No, but as I hear you saying that you want to kind of revisit this a little bit, I'll do something that's a little bit more solid, just so you can.
Okay, and then I had a question about the deferred compensation, which I think I've already articulated some of my angst around that. So it looks to me like the deferred compensation in fact, the mere receiving of it, or us giving it, is a given every year, and it doesn't seem to vary at all depending on the performance. Even though I see here where it says that the performance is a 1.6 to a 3, it's a pretty big range. And so I was just curious why there isn't a sliding scale on the deferred compensation. Just as there is a sliding scale, that might not be the right word, up on that weighted average range. Does that make sense?
Right, so a
Question?
breakout, if it was, so break it out so that there were a few options instead of just one.
Yeah.
Right, because this just,
The higher the rating, the better. The higher the
you always get a deferred
compensation.
compensation. It doesn't matter how good you are. You're going to get it anyway.
Well, it's related to, you have to at least get a good or excellent rating. So if you're just successful or fair, there's no adjustment. So you have to be on
Right, but
the upper 2.
within 1.6 to 3, there's, a 1.5% increase difference in the compensation increase. So why wouldn't there be the same kind of fluctuation in the deferred compensation?
If I can take a stab at it, I think it was looked at as an adjustment for performance that was better, and it was kind of like a one-time piece of a benefit adjustment, as opposed to being in compensation where there's a range of what might be there. We had talked about what some different options might be on a benefit adjustment in order to reward good or excellent performance versus a fair. And, it could have been anywhere from a few extra vacation days, or there might be, I think when we talked last time, there was an adjustment for training on a year or something like this. And so this was kind of a one one-time piece to keep it as simple as possible. So we can look at doing some sliding stuff. I think it just gets into the complexity of what you have there, and that the intent there was to make for good or excellent performance, a benefit adjustment that paralleled that.
The other piece on that it's based on longevity, it steps up. So the longer you're here, it steps up.
Well, is this, is this a bonus? I know in
I
the
wouldn't put it
private
in that one.
sector, that would be considered a bonus. But you can't do that, can you, in the public sector?
So Denise, I guess what I would say is, I wouldn't see it as a bonus. I would see it as a part of, it's an increase to what the current compensation package is for the city manager and for non-represented employees to have deferred comp. And granted, here, you're looking at increasing it. And I think at one of the last sessions, I hope I'm not misquoting anybody, but I think it was incentivizing someone to stay based on that performance. And so it's not a bonus in my mind, since it's already something that's built into his contract. It's just recognizing that and incenting to stay, which was how we were factoring also for this. I don't know if that answers your question, but city employees already receive deferred comp, so I don't see that as a bonus.
Is that, no, I hate to ask a stupid question.
That's
Is that part of PERS?
no,
Deferred
no,
comp?
it's totally separate.
It goes into the equivalent of a 401K.
Similar structure called
Is this
something
an
else.
employee match?
This, on this page,
Or is there a match? Yeah, it's from the employer.
not to this.
This is the amount that, right now in my contract, the city sets aside $12,000 a year, or puts $12,000 a year into an equivalent of a 401K for me. I can choose to add more to that or not, but the city puts in $12,000 as part of my current contract. What this would do is say, and it's based on sort of a longevity, as long as you're performing good or better on July 1, 2001, we'll increase that by $2,000. So you would actually put $14,000 into that.
Well, I think I just have a philosophical problem with deferred compensation, so I'll just leave it at that.
Rick Brown.
Thanks. But no, in addition to all this, there's COLAs. Is that correct? Cost of living
There can be.
every year, but there isn't right now?
There wasn't in last fiscal year.
I see.
And the executive team for the first 6 months of this fiscal year is not receiving a COLA as well.
Okay. What are COLAs typically, I mean, on average?
It depends on
3%.
the index, and it can range just based on the economy, and also depending on what your employment status is, whether you're in a collective, in a bargaining unit where you've got an agreement that projects that amount, or if you're a non-rep. And so those vary.
This year, the non-rep was 1.8%.
I see. Okay. Where did you guys just invent this model, or was some other city use this? I mean, it's intriguing. I kind of like it. I need to study it and think about it a little bit more, but...
I would say this exact model isn't something that we pulled from someplace else, but certainly when you look at compensation structures, you do look at percentages, and so in some places you might say, not in a city manager position here, but you have steps in a range, and so it can be 3%, 4.5%, or whatever it is that organization has set for each of the steps on a range. And so I think some of this, while not the same, has a little bit of that flavor to it. And then certainly the deferred comp piece is a component that already exists, so it was just factoring that in as well.
I think,
Oh,
excuse me, I think one of the things that's a little bit different in this structure than I've seen, because I've seen things comparable to this in other compensation systems was the piece around weighting the different ratings, and that was an effort to balance out the fact there's 8 people contributing. If you've got a single manager rating an employee, it's a little different than when you've got 8 managers, 9 managers rating.
Take the average.
So that's where the weighting comes into it and helps us be able to balance it out.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Alan?
I'm comfortable with the changes made, and I like the structure. Maybe one thing that would be helpful on deferred comp is it's kind of a retirement piece in that it is not, it's tax deferred going in, but taxable on the way out. So ostensibly, your tax rate is lower when you're retired. So it is a very common way to, in the public sector and in the private sector, to add to people's retirement. I really like the structure of having it be tied to how long John's here. I think the longer we can keep him, the better off we are. And so incentivizing him to be able to stay here an extra year would be a good thing. And I think that's what this is intended to do, and hopefully it'll do that. So I'm ready to move forward with it. I think it's a good proposal and would support it.
Mike?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I agreed with the first part of what Alan said there with regard to incentivizing John's long-term tenure here. I think I needed to say that obviously the marks that you receive from the internal panels and from the external community groups, and then certainly from the council, reflect most people's opinion that you've done an excellent job. And I really felt like I needed to say that when we're having this kind of discussion about whether we move forward or not. I wouldn't want that to anyone watching this to think that reflects on you in any way, because I think it's roundly considered you've done an excellent job. I would want to, though, as another piece of information in a future process, always have comparable information so that we'd know where other executives of both other similarly sized municipalities regionally and up and down the West Coast are, as well as, at least speaking for myself, I'd be interested in knowing where other executives are compensated at other private organizations of similar size that would have 1,500 employees or something like that. So we could just take a look at the comparable of what are we compensating our chief executive with as opposed to other organizations.
And we certainly heard the comments provided by Councilor Ortiz at the last session about having market, the preference to have the market data available. And we certainly have jurisdictions that we match to as far as just for review. Currently, those are public sector, but I'm hearing at least that you have an interest in broadening that.
I'm personally fine with the public sector. I just want to have some sense. I mean, what I want some sense of is not only West Coast varies dramatically in terms of what our economies are like and in terms of what our budgets are like and everything. So I just, some kind of comparative or something that's similar to us with the condition that we're in kind of thing would be helpful. So I don't know if that's...
Like City of Bell.
That's what I was getting at.
That's awesome. Yes.
A question about how the council might use that information. If you want the comparisons just as background, but you're not going to use it to make a decision as to whether the budget situation is ominous or whatever word you decide to choose, that's one thing. If you want to be able to take that information into account in deciding whether to give the raise that this would provide, then we should change the language to give you that flexibility. Because what you wouldn't want to be in a position to do is to say, budget situation is good, the economy has recovered, no problem there, but in comparing what this would give John versus what cities that aren't Bell, what their managers are getting, no, this seems like too much. This language doesn't give you that flexibility, and I'd advise you strongly against deciding that the budget situation was ominous just so you wouldn't wind up giving him the raise. So we'd want to build in different kinds of flexibility if that's what you want to do with the information.
Well, that's where I would want us to have the opportunity to come back at a future meeting to make a decision, much like mixing it with the auditor. This isn't something I'm sure I want to just make a snap decision on.
Alan?
Well, it's not a snap decision. We've been working on it. This is our third meeting on it, but
Not this part.
didn't we already do that? We set the city manager's salary by doing a market survey and looking at the like cities and set the salary when we hired John.
That's correct.
And so this, and if all cities, I mean, usually what you do is a salary survey every 5 years, because they're expensive and difficult to do when you do them across the board. And in part because it's difficult, but in part because it's, they don't change that much. If everybody keeps going with inflation or little merit increases like envisioned in this process, then you're pretty much keeping with market unless something dramatic happens. But I don't see that happening. So this should and has already embodied in it the market survey, and it's just an adjustment to that. It's not like we're going to go every single year and do a new market survey. I don't think that that's warranted. I mean, we've already done that. We did our due diligence when we hired John and offered him this salary. So I don't really feel it's necessary to keep doing that every single year. I mean, every 5 years might be an appropriate time to do that. And this actually only goes through 15, so it actually does do it after 5 years, right? 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 5 years. You can count.
Look at that.
Well, perhaps then, Alan, as people are, depending on whether you make the decision to move on this tonight or you put it off, you just have that information come back again that you've already had out there to remind people of how this fits with that. So I think that's what you're hearing, not to do it again, but. And, okay, so Andrea, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm good with going either way. It feels like people need to let this, percolate a little bit longer.
bit of fine-tuning.
I don't know how I am, I'm really thinking about, Mike, your comment about using the same kind of matrix for the auditor. Is that what I'm hearing?
We've already actually asked them to come back with a
Okay.
system for the audit
Similar.
that's similar.
Okay. I'm okay with, I would be okay with either. I just wanted to say that, I have a friend who moved to Texas, and she's helping build another hospital down there, and in Texas, they get paid a heck of a lot more than people do here. Not that, I know that's apples and oranges, and so, their economy
And oil
is
wells are
different.
not.
I'm sorry?
I said
Oil wells are not.
yes.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
But it's just interesting, when we have this conversation about market analysis, it really does depend on where you're at, as far as geographics, East Coast, West Coast, central part of America. So thank you for the work you've done, Alana. Appreciate it. And also, I mean, it works for me, which way we want to go.
I'm going to just make one more comment, and I don't know whether that somehow gets in this or not, but I actually think it's important in some way when we put what we put together that we have some statement of what we're trying to achieve. Because I think what we're really trying to do is create that kind of unbiased, more routinized way, but with looking for excellence, a way of moving.
That could accommodate reality.
Right. And I think it's important for people to know what we're trying to achieve, and then I think what you're hearing around the table with people in varying levels of comfort is just a strong desire to be able to explain to a public that are feeling in tough times exactly how we're basing our decision about how we pay the folks who work for us, and to be able to really be able to do that in it, tell them what we're trying to accomplish and why we're doing it, and why it's fair for us to do it the way we end up doing it. And I think that's what people are we're really looking for here. So whatever makes you all feel that you've hit all those bases and are being fair and just to an employee that you feel is doing a really good job, I think that's what we're what we're aiming for. So and I believe if we are able to do that and everybody's comfortable and can really justify what their decision, then it's going to be better for the community and better for us as leaders in the community. So, yes.
Just taking a quick head count, I count one that wants to move forward, one that could go either way, and at least 1, 2, 3, 4 of maybe wanting us to come back with synthesized information that we've put out here tonight, and perhaps even with the auditor as well, and so we're moving forward with all our employees with the same kind of system, or at least similar. Do I have that?
Yep. Sure. Okay. Anything else for the good?
Just real quickly, with the auditor, do you want them both back at the same time, which would be...
Well, that was just my thinking, but...
And have one work session that talks about both of them? Which
Would that make it easier for staff?
I don't know, Alana, it's kind of up to you. I don't know what works for you.
Well, we're coming back with the police auditor's evaluation on the 20th, so, I don't know.
That's the evaluation, not the compensation
Right,
process.
it's just, so whether you would want it, I mean...
I think the evaluation is a totally separate thing
Yeah.
from the
Right?
from
So
the
that's the only thing we
compensation
have
issue.
scheduled, and...
I'd like to, speaking only for myself, I'd like to see us systemize how we're treating our employees and make them both similar so that it's not about personalities, it's not about that, it's about, this is the system we use here, so.
For us, I mean, we've heard the comments today, if it's to go back and tweak, we've got, I think, enough to go forward and do that, and if it's going to be similar, it doesn't sound like extra work for us, it'll be based on your comments. If you decide to deviate between the two in different ways, then we just would
do that.
Take that and go
Chris?
forward.
Yeah, I think the evaluation piece is disconnected. I mean, we can take the evaluation piece and process that appropriately. Just talking about the compensation part and systematizing it, I think we can do it, I think we can tweak it relatively quickly, and I don't think the system needs to vary much between the auditor and the city manager. I mean, it's basically a structure for ranges, and so I don't see that being real complicated or need to take a lot of time. So I don't want that to really slow us down. I mean, I want to move forward with what I think is tweaking and come back relatively soon on just the compensation piece.
I don't think you have to, so you don't have to wait for the evaluation to occur.
Yeah, you don't have to wait for the evaluation part.
And may I ask clarification, Councilor Pryor, I'm hearing you say just on the compensation piece, but I also have heard requests to basically clean up some of the ratings with some of the feedback, so I would see us coming back with some of that as well.
I understand, I appreciate that, and that would be the intent as well, yeah. at
You
least
feel
for me.
clear, you got everything that you think you need? Anybody else need to add anything?
Do you?
Yes,
I just
Jennifer.
want to know if this was all retroactive.
No, it's
This is for
2012 and beyond.
This is making an amendment adjustment to John's contract, and I'm assuming the parallel process would happen for the auditor also in terms of coming up with amended language.
Anything else fun you think everybody should be taking into consideration? All right. Yep. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good work.
Thank you.